Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So I figured a little afternoon recording was in order because turns out there's quite a number of different things that we'll be going into. I'm recording this in the afternoon on Friday, October the 31st, hence the thematically appropriate background. You'll be seeing that again. If you check this out on Friday, you'll be seeing it again on the Friday live stream. So there's a little spoiler for you. Boo, spectacular. The other thing as well, also the headgear is appropriate. October 31st is Game 6 of the World Series. So if down the road you check this out on the archive, now we're pretty much time-stamped on exactly what's going on. So part of the reason I wanted to record this is that I did catch a video from Cllct with no vowels from Darren Novell actually interviewing Jason Mashura, president of Upper Deck, who earlier in this week had a post on LinkedIn that actually went hobby viral, we'll call it. And since other people are talking about it and done videos on it, I figured I was just going to talk about it on the Friday live stream. And that was the plan, and we're still going to talk about it on the Friday live stream with everybody else involved. But then I saw this Cllct video where Darren Novell interviewed him, and he got a chance to elaborate on some of his comments. So I figured I would do a little response to that as kind of a precursor to it. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Sports Collectors Daily article, the Panini, of not only Panini of America, but the entire company of Panini. The for sale sign may have gone up in front, and Topps/Fanatics is one of the potential candidates. We'll talk about that as well. We've got the World Series talk. We are less than a week from the Toronto Fall Expo, so that's going to be interesting as well. Officially, at about the time that I'm recording this, in about 90 minutes, it'll be exactly 6 days. So it's a week Thursday afternoon. 4 o'clock is the VIP night. So I'm recording this on Friday. So we're going to be 6 days. We are now officially under a week and counting, and we're getting closer to it. As I said, World Series, we got the Upper Deck President's comments, we got Panini going on. So business is starting to pick up a little bit in terms of the newsy side of things, or at least the piece that we can have some commentary on. Now, with that said, let me focus in on this one. I'm going to give a quick reminder of you've probably seen about 10 videos about it on this, but again, this additional commentary piece on the interview is actually going to be a little addition to it. But before I get into that, let me quickly review what was actually said on the LinkedIn post. I've got it screenshotted here for you, and I'm going to read it to you quickly, but it covers a little bit of ground. This is Jason Mashura, president of the Upper Deck Company, so it is on his personal LinkedIn, and he says, everything is speculative is up right now. The stock market, Bitcoin, trading cards, and is pricing some collectors out. Here's what the data shows. 50% of consumer spending in the US is coming from 10% of the population. Rich people are carrying the market, not just in cars, but across every category. Concert tickets, $1,000 for nosebleeds. Luxury goods, selling faster than ever. High-end collectibles, moving at record prices. So I'm going to pause here for a second. And I reiterated this already on the live stream and everything when we were talking about funny timing of everything. We were actually talking about the World Series tickets here in Toronto and how that was going off the charts. And right now with Game 6 and potentially Game 7, if it comes to that, those prices have already gone up quite a bit as well. So it's one of those things where I agree with a lot of these sentiments, but I'm going to get back to when we talk about the video, why it's kind of interesting and kind of funny. And that's why I kind of appreciated that with the interview discussion that I will do a response to here, is that he does elaborate on some of these pieces, add some additional context, because while this is all fine and dandy, it's still kind of open-ended. So now we wanted to get a little bit more into the why you decided to make the statement now, and that's where the interview kind of covers that a little bit more. Now, moving on here, when boxes cost $1,000 or more, you're not buying for fun anymore. You're speculating. You're betting that what you buy today will be worth significantly more tomorrow. And that works until it doesn't. And we're going to come back to that in a little while here. Sports cards have always had speculation built in. You collect a rookie hoping to become a Hall of Famer. But what's happening now is different in scale. When markets become this speculative, they become fragile. I'm not saying the sky is falling. I'm saying we need to be honest about what's happening. This isn't sustainable growth driven by collectors who love the hobby. This is wealth concentration driving prices that most people can't participate in. And if that money suddenly moves elsewhere to bet on something else, we all feel it. Now, remember, we had the conversation about, that Medano Shield card, and we had a little bit of fun about the pricing and everything. We talked about it on last week's live stream, and then on the podcast as well. So it's one of those things. It's funny that the timing on all this kind of worked out where we kind of get to go full circle on it, but it is interesting hearing it from the president of Upper Deck. Now, real quick, the $1,000 price point is kind of a funny one because obviously, given the licenses that Upper Deck actually has access to, in reality, the cup is basically the only product they have that clears that $1,000 price point. So it is kind of interesting that he brings it up in a situation where really only his competitors have products that pretty much exceed that. Panini and Topps both have products that go north of this, but it's kind of interesting. And, all I'll say, and I'll get back to it when we do the reaction to the video interview, is that if Upper Deck had access to the basketball license, the baseball license, or the football license, you don't think Exquisite would be north of 1,000? So it's just interesting that he happens to be running the company that while they do have a major league license, they have the one least able to have $1,000 plus boxes. They do have one that kind of hits that number, but even Ultimate and then Premier, which came out just this past week, all of those fall well short of that. And they kind of have to, based on the nature of the design. But I will also get back to talking about a couple of his points related to that because it is interesting he brings this up. And by the way, the $1,000 threshold, I don't disagree, but I'll be honest, when boxes cost $500 or more, you're not buying for fun anymore. When they cost $400 or more, you're not buying for fun anymore. People can afford it, people, but I'm saying that the average rank and file collector is not buying three, four, $500 boxes. So I think your threshold is actually a lot lower than you're giving credit for. Money is being allocated in other places, and even the collectors necessarily may not want to allocate it to take a shot. I think once you surpass about $300, $400 a box, you're not buying for fun anymore necessarily. You are speculating. There is a little bit more of that. And I'll speak to it tangibly once we get into the interview portion here. So now I'm going to switch over. I'll use a little editing magic. We'll go into the interview from Cllct with Daniel Ravel and Jason Mashra talking about this and elaborating on some of the points that they made in this one. All right, so here we are. I'm on it. I've moved it about 45 seconds in just to get rid of the brief introductions, and we're going to get right into the meat and potatoes of this thing. So this is on the Cllct YouTube channel. I will include a link in the description to it for you so you can check it out for yourself. It's about 17 minutes long. It's not too bad at all, but I'm going to speed it up a little bit to 1.5 speed on my end, just so that we can get through some of the pieces a little bit. I'll pause a few times to elaborate on a few specific things that I thought were interesting or that maybe I want to add a little bit of context to, because I don't necessarily disagree with this thesis, but kind of going back to when I read the LinkedIn post, there are a couple of funny things. Again, we have to take the source into account a little bit, so I do want to kind of make a couple of points related to some of that. But let's get into it here.
So first of all, I'm going to ask you, were you surprised at how viral this went?
Very, very much so. I'm not saying anything that isn't fact, essentially. I mean, everything speculative is skyrocketing.
So why do you think that people in the hobby felt the need to react, to put it out? What do you think it was? Is it that the hobby doesn't often talk about this stuff, that it's taboo, that we just keep going? What do you think it was that really touched a nerve?
Yeah, I think people feel like they're either on one side or the other. I think so much of what's going on in society is very polarizing at this point. So I think there are a vast majority of people who feel like they can't afford a box of cards. And let me make it clear, like Upper Deck has a ton of affordable options. It's largely a lot of the other sports that people, I think, feel priced out of. But
okay, I'm going to pause there. I kind of have to make the point here because I'm glad he included this caveat, but at the same time, again, I go back to what I said a few moments ago. I think the $1,000 threshold actually is beautifully positioned, so then in reality, he's able to point to everybody else, because again, Upper Deck, with the licenses that they do have availability to, don't have the products that are going to necessarily justify the $1,000 price point. And I think it's one of those things, because a lot of reaction and response that I heard to the original post were people like, cheering this because they're like, oh, somebody's listening to us and being more collector friendly. And I go, okay, I'm not going to say that Master here is not coming from a place of that. But at the same time, if Upper Deck could, again, I asked the question a few minutes ago. If Upper Deck had the license to baseball, had the license to football, had the license to basketball, you're telling me that they wouldn't use Cllct? The cup is a unique case because obviously the branding and everything associated to it and all that, because if it wasn't the cup, it would be Hockey Cllct. And Cllct is still used in some of these brands as a supplement to some of these other categories, but Cllct is kind of the high-end brand that can be used. If they had basketball tomorrow, they would 100% have a basketball Cllct, and don't you think that would be north of $1,000 a box? So what happened? Did we just suddenly not become collector friendly? No, the marketplace allows the justification of it. You can get away with it in some of those other categories, while there is a very passionate fan base in hockey and some of the non-sport properties that they have access to as well. It's one of those things where, yes, you can do things like that, but the marketplace won't allow it. I talk often in my channel that I'm a collector of the AEW product that Upper Deck makes, and I'm a fan of a lot of it. I do have some criticism, some critiques on some of it as well, but I do like some of it. But I'm always very transparent with people that I believe that even at the price point that they're at, which by the way is much lower than what Top/Fanatics is doing for an equivalent type of product, it's also a secondary license. WWE, whether I agree or disagree, whether I think it's justified or not justified based on the product, is the number one brand in that space. So because they're the number one brand, they have a little bit more of an ability to be able to press. If Upper Deck had a WWE license, they would be able to justify charging more per box for a similar design, for a similar setup. They could have Metal Universe WWE, and for the PMGs and what the PMGs would go for, like a gold PMG of Roman Reigns or John Cena and all this stuff, the box price would probably be higher than the equivalent AEW one. It's not a coincidence. It's not suddenly being less collector friendly. It's just understanding what your marketplace is. And in hockey and some of these other licenses they have, you can't justify it. You could make a $1,000 a box AEW product. I would love for you to tell me who would buy it. I'm sure there's a couple people that would. And I'll get back to that a little bit of something else as well that I kind of have to point out. Somebody has to provide the counterbalance here a little bit. I appreciate the sentiment, but we also have to kind of look past the sentiment and realize that while what you're saying may not be fundamentally wrong, at the same time, you're also in a certain position where you can say it as somebody who is not in a position to be able to charge multi-$1,000 for boxes anyway. And as a business, if the marketplace would allow it, if the secondary market prices pushed it to that point, you would be leaving so much money on the table that the executives around you would be looking at you a little side eye if you didn't at least consider taking a little bit of that money off the table for yourselves. But the fact that the marketplace won't let you do it is part of the reason that you're able to say, well, you've only got a handful of products at most that even reach that price point, while Topps and Panini, with the licenses they have been able to do it.
But I also think there are people that are taking advantage of the speculative nature of the industry right now and making a lot of money. So they don't want anybody criticizing that.
Are you worried about a particular segment of the population, maybe the young people who haven't gone through a cycle? Obviously, anyone who loves the hobby wants to protect those people because you don't want them to say, I'm never coming back again.
Well, look, I think it's hard, and this industry in particular is very hard because there is a high end to the market. That high end will always be there. And I think what we're seeing right now in the US market in particular is the high end consumer is doing very well. And I don't think that's going to change. There's a large transfer of wealth going on in this country, generational wealth being passed down. I think what is tough is that our market is very aspirational. And the new collectors and the novice collectors and the everyday collectors always want the best, but in many cases they can't afford those cards. And they see, especially with social media, those cards being put out there, those sets being put out there on a regular basis, and they get disappointed that they can't get it. I think what I'm most concerned about is the speculation where, you see these hype trains, especially on social media, of certain players you need to invest in now, certain cards you need to invest in now. And what we've seen since the beginning of time in this industry is that the market moves. It can move up, it can move down, but when it moves down, sometimes people get burned and they don't come back. And that's always the most concerning when it gets into these market cycles, for sure.
Some of it to me seems to be the dopamine that has been injected into this society, right? I have twin sons. They mostly collect upper deck hockey, and I'll buy them a box, and they are turned on for anything that is in gold foil and numbered. And one of my sons stands by the garbage can and he throws out any base card. Doesn't matter if he likes the player or not. So I feel like our society is on tilt. We are maybe in this degenerate economy, sorry. And it's just, I feel like if it's not Bitcoin, it's gambling. If it's not gambling, it's breaking. If it's not breaking, it's opening up packs. And there is this bar that is set that might be unrealistic. How do you feel?
Now I'm going to pause here. Obviously, that's kind of mid-question, and I went past his answer into the next question a little bit because I thought the comment was kind of interesting, since that is something that a lot of people talk about. But let me quickly touch on two things. So the first part is I go back to what I said earlier. I don't fundamentally disagree with what Jason here is saying as far as a lot of these components of it, but also I kind of have to point out that it's like, well, the aspirational side of it is part and parcel with the whole thing that's going on with the marketplace as well. I'm glad he's acknowledging it, but at the same time that he's acknowledging it, we're also kind of creating that scenario. We kind of have to build up these things. And again, going back to conversation from literally the last couple of weeks, we don't even have to go back that far. We can have conversations about where I lamented, and I did a video kind of discussing that. I literally did a video where I said the comp that broke comps. That was the title of it, where I talked about that Mike Medano shield. And a lot of people will ask like, oh, but you're kind of fixating on this one. It's just in general. I can actually give you, and I'll share tonight, an example of another shield card that wasn't in Slab Sharks. It was outside of that. It was in an auction that happened that ended on eBay last night that I'm recording this for Crosby shield card. That sold for pretty good money. I don't know if it was a record price. I don't know if it's the highest amount in a while. I'm not sure. I don't have the context of it. I'll look it up a little bit this afternoon to try to get better context on it. But the point is, it was another very strong price in a series of very strong prices as these shield cards are escalating and escalating. And these shield cards are available in certain specific products that Upper Deck makes. Now, this shield card that I'm going to share with you on the Friday Live is actually from the brief run that Panini had with shield cards. So it is another brand. But at the same time, today, the only one that can give you the shield cards for hockey specifically is Upper Deck. And currently it's in products like Ultimate. So it's one of those things where the product Ultimate is at a certain price point today. If the shield cards keep going up in price, they become even more aspirational, as Jason, to use his word. If they become even more so, wouldn't you consider, as that ceiling goes up, the floor kind of stays where it is because the other stuff still isn't necessarily getting pulled up from it. So do you leave the Ultimate at the same price point next year? Or does it get tweaked upwards? Do you make an adjustment? Does something like that happen? And that's a question not for me. That's a question for, for Jason Masher and the people who are making the decisions over at Upper Deck HQ. But it does kind of give you a little bit of thought, is that if the secondary market is liking these specific things so much and the price point keeps creeping up on it, and this small percentage of people keep throwing more money into the segment, as long as it's going, do you then make any adjustments to the price point? Or do you leave the price point the same? Maybe they do. But regardless, Ultimate is still a feast or famine product. You're not getting a ton of cards in a box, kind of going back to Darren. So this is kind of how it bleeds into the Darren Ravel question. He's giving the analogy of his sons and everything when they open up the cards, and basically they throw away the base cards because the base cards really don't mean that much to them. They're only really looking for the hits and the parallels and those things. That's more a reflection on today, where there's just not as many set builders. Something like Upper Deck Flagship still has its set builders because there are people that like to have the base set with the Young Guns. The Young Guns are just a little bit short printed, give you enough to be able to challenge you a little bit, so you can't complete it in a box or two. So you do have to kind of look around for some of the singles, maybe do a little bit of trading back and forth a little bit because it's not as prevalent as it once was, but there's still a little element of that still remaining. So it's one of the few sets that still has a little bit of a set collector base because you do have the Young Guns being there, and they are slightly short printed, not so much so that it's unfair, but enough to provide a little bit of a challenge. But those become hits in and of themselves. If you got Demidov from this most recent Upper Deck Flagship, that's a hit. That whole card holds a little bit of value, at least in the short term. Now, long term, if he becomes a great player and the Montreal Canadiens do very well with him and everything, well, obviously that'll appreciate. The Connor McDavid Young Guns over the years, the Crosby Young Guns, the Ovechkin Young Guns. Young Guns still hold a good place of it because they were slightly short printed, thereby making them just a little bit more interesting. And you've still got a couple of set builders that are absorbing a little bit of that population, because if you didn't have those set builders, you'd have even more of them floating around outside of sets. But because you've got a little bit of set builders left over and you've got the people that are chasing the individual cards, they become very liquid. They move around in the marketplace. Those cards have something going for them. But a lot of the rest of the sets, the base cards, in the trash. That's basically what happens in a lot of instances. So it's one of those things. It's kind of, you're creating your own situation where people are looking for these hits, so these lower tier cards become less desirable. At the same time, to Jason's point from earlier in this very same conversation, he was talking about the whole aspirational thing. He only touched on it briefly, and I do want a little bit of credit for my restraint, because when he mentioned that, some people want some of these nicer cards, but they might not be able to afford them. If it was Friday night, I might have been inclined at around the time that comment happened to hit a certain button talking about people wanting something and maybe not being able to afford it.
Guess what? Because you're poor.
I didn't say I wouldn't push the button. I just said on Friday night I would have done it basically at the moment he said it. The slight delay is me being 5% more mature. So you're welcome on that. But regardless, I don't disagree with this point, but I'm back to kind of what I said a little bit earlier. It's like you're kind of also part and parcel of the responsibility of the people that are helping to make some of these things happen. You are playing into the marketplace, but you're also setting some of the expectations and standards with the product lines, the way they're set up, the way they're designed. It's a tough situation. I'm not putting it all on Jason Mashera. So, because that totally wouldn't be fair. But I just think it's interesting that then the person who's championing this is also the same person who's kind of holding the status quo on this, at least from the perspective that they're able to at Upper Deck. And some of the collector-friendly things are less because of a concerted effort, per se, and more of market reality. You can't push the envelope because the market won't let you, at least that specific market. If you're in one of these other markets, I wonder if you would have the same answer to the same question. Regardless, let's move on. He did ask the question about kind of the cars being thrown out and moving towards that. Let's get Jason's answer on that.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think I heard a term the other day called the new gambling economy, right? And we're seeing this with sports gambling. We're seeing this with predictive markets are the new hot thing.
Bitcoin goes 24/7.
Bitcoin again is speculative, and people are making bets. You can trade options and futures on Bitcoin. There is now this built-in societal gambling economy that is very common here, and people are kind of looking for that dopamine hit. And look, we're in I would say a very much a bull run market all the way through. And again, people are able to make money, whether it's on Bitcoin or stocks. I mean, if you look at stocks right now, the PE ratios are almost at all-time highs. So people are overvaluing stocks in many cases. Same thing is happening in collectibles. So it all works until the market shifts. And again, that's where you get concerned on whether you lose collectors, because they lose at some point.
The biggest criticism I heard of this is, well, Jason's at Upper Deck. He knows he's pricing things right, but it's also hockey and he has to price things right versus, the NBA and MLB, NFL, they're a little bit hotter right now. You have a bigger mass market. And so it's really just a criticism of his competitors. How do you respond to that?
I mean, this has been going on for quite some time. Look, there are definitely some market forces and some things being done to manipulate the prices and raise the prices in the industry. And look, there's litigation over that right now. We'll let the courts decide. I think there are some things that are forcing those prices high. And look, part of it is in some cases the market is naturally going that way, right? So you can't fault certain people on certain products. But there are some things that are natural and there's some things that are artificial. Look, we have products in hockey that get hot. We saw that during the 23-24 hockey season. There were products that got hot and the market adjusted to it. But we weren't intentionally trying to take advantage of the speculation in the market at that point. We were trying to serve the customers, and certain products get hot and certain prices go up. So I think it depends really on what the product is, what the market is, things of that nature. But we've had products that have gotten hot when we had a lot of marble products got very, very hot. We didn't take advantage of customers or feed into the speculation with those products.
Okay, now I'm going to pause him there because there's a couple of interesting things. So I'm going to take him face value on a lot of what he said there as far as not taking advantage. I'm putting that in quotation marks. But at the same time, the Marvel thing was so fast. It was so rapid in which the price point went up on those Marvel PMGs. If you guys remember a couple of years back, that was a big thing that happened. But then he's also talking about the hockey market and that some products get hot. The Bedard rookie year is one that we would talk about. The Bedard tax became kind of infamous on the hockey side of things. And it's one of those things where it's like, yes, the distributors definitely took advantage of that as a result of the way that market went and the hysteria that was there for a little bit there in some of those product years. But it was every single product. Some of the products weren't hot at all, really. And yes, people were chasing after the Bedard because that was the chase in that brief moment. But it's one of those things where I would have to almost ask point blank. It's like, I'm not saying that you jacked up the price before the distribution side at all, because I have no evidence to that. But at the same time, we know the distributors took a cut. But the question that I would present is really simple, and it would be kind of a yes or no question. Was the price that the distributors were being offered that particular year's flagship, for example? We'll just use that as an example because there was a lot of it printed. So was the price point on flagship the same or similar as the previous year and the same or similar as the year after that? Because we had the one year where we had that big bump up, and then the following year we were kind of back settled around normal. It's one of those things where, yes, some of this stuff is going to ramp up over time, but we did see obviously a really big spike in that one year. So are we saying it's exclusively the secondary market and distributors, and that Upper Deck didn't have any additional, literally they charge the exact same amount for the boxes as every single year? That is a question that I would ask. I'm just going to say I'm a little dubious. I just put the question mark out there. I'm going to put question mark, but at the same time, that would be a question that I would probably pose and ask. And I don't care about percentages. You don't have to tell me what the number is. But my question is the wholesale price the same, a little bit more, or a little bit less than the year before, and the same, a little bit more, or a little bit less than the year after? If we see any adjustment in it that went up, well, then that kind of undermines that comment. It's like, well, I don't care if it's $5. If it's any higher than the previous year and there wasn't any other reason why that would have changed, then yes, there was at least some element of, hey, well, this product is going to be a little bit hotter because we've got a prospect here that people are going to be chasing. So yes, we did create it. And Upper Deck historically, in history, Exquisite was created because of the right rookie in the right moment. The cup was created because there was a double rookie class. It was the perfect time, perfect place to create this super high-end product. Another time might not have been able to justify it. It was the perfect time and perfect place. There's nothing wrong with that. That's tremendous business. If there's this brief shining moment, you got to take advantage of it where you can. But at the same time, the idea that they didn't take advantage of Marvel because it was hot for a minute, not literally a minute, but what I'm saying is it was quick. It was a quick ascend, and then it started to come back down not long after. So it's not like with the turnaround time on getting these products out the door, you wouldn't have had the chance to. If Marvel had been sustainable for even 3 or 4 years, then maybe we would have had a different conversation. Maybe the next couple of Marvel sets would have gone up accordingly. So it's kind of an interesting comment, just saying that just because you couldn't take advantage of it because of the timing, that you wouldn't have. And the question was left hanging in the air there for a moment. It's like, well, then by proxy, your competitors did, and other people are manipulating at things, because the question was, are you kind of saying something about your competitors? And he did kind of sidestep that question a little bit there and focus on the manipulation piece, which is the next part here, which I think is very interesting. But again, I'm just going to interject a little bit of, just as a counter to it, it does make me kind of raise my eyebrows a little bit. And I do pose the question that is like, let's not act like we're completely innocent in the taking a little bit of extra money off the top when the opportunities present themselves.
There was something that really threw me off recently when someone told me it's manipulated, but manipulation is now cool.
Yeah.
I was brought up to think that manipulation would then lead to a downturn, right? Because manipulation wasn't real or it was fraudulent. And, there is this case this is kind of like a little bit heady stuff, but there is this case that we're in this manipulative environment where it's all fair game, right? The GameStop and being a MAME stock. By the way, now who thought they'd be having 40% of their revenue from PSA? But that and Bitcoin, and it's just everyone putting on a facade. And we are now in this new economy where manipulation is okay and accepted. And if it's not the truth or whatever, it's okay. Is there any sense from you that there's possibly a new game that's being played and it's allowed to happen?
100% the market is being manipulated. And again, I think it's being manipulated across different segments, right? So I can't speak to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and the stock market and things of that nature. But we see, I would say show bidding is at an all-time high. If you look at completed sales, it's really interesting. If you compare on eBay the sold listings versus the Terapeak data that shows what listings are actually paid for, there's a hefty differential between the two.
See, let me stop there. That is very interesting to me because when I first started to report eBay sales, and I would say that's probably 2009, someone said to me, "You're actually," at that point there wasn't Terapeak for me to check, and I just accepted it as fact. And someone said to me, "You're part of the problem because you then become the stepping stone that then the next fraudulent guy goes off of." So you've looked at this and you've seen sales go. Most of the market says that that's the comp, and the comp is not that comp since it was never paid for.
Correct. Correct. And there's a lot of that going on. The same thing's happening at all the auction houses. I think they've done a good job of not speaking to it, that there are a large number of auctions that go unpaid. One of the things that's being talked about right now is that some of the auction houses essentially let themselves bid on auctions, which I think is really interesting. These
some auction houses have moved to states that allow you to bid it up to a hidden reserve.
Right. Which again is manipulating the market data. We have quote unquote private sales that happen that make markets as well, where essentially the market has no idea if that's a legitimate transaction or not. It's just reported as a private sale. There is a ton of manipulation going on, and again, that's what worries me when you talk about consumers getting hurt eventually. The amount of manipulation that's going on across the market is pretty hefty. I mean, we've heard reports too where if people change their prices on new product, that they're getting calls from different manufacturers to adjust that pricing back up and make sure that it stays at a certain level,
or they don't get that product again.
Correct. So I mean, the amount of manipulation is I think rampant through the industry right now, and you're right, it's happening across a lot of different platforms and segments, even beyond collectibles.
So where do we?
This one's actually very interesting. This segment here, this little section here, is interesting. Is kind of an addition to what the original LinkedIn post was talking about, because now we're entering the realm of market manipulation. We got private sales in there. If you hit that one on your bingo card, we've got auction houses and all that. I just think Jason brought up some very interesting things there that kind of create some fun fodder. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on this one on the Friday live stream, because we got a couple of minutes that we can talk about this. But I just think it's another interesting little point that he hit on, another category, an area that he went into. So look, I'm saying for all the bits where I'm I'm pushing back on certain parts and adding a little bit of context where I think it's appropriate, I will say though that I do appreciate that Jason Mashra took it some time to become the hobby commentator here. I am kind of enjoying this aspect of it. And then also, given his role, it automatically gives it a little bit of more pronouncement. And look, let's be clear about that. Praise the content gods. As always, they are bountiful in terms of what they gave us on this one. But I'm just, like I said, I'm going to come back to one specific thing related to kind of, holding prices at a certain thing and kind of that element of it, because there is an element of something that Upper Deck talks about. And here's a little spoiler, EPAC. We'll talk about that in a minute, where it kind of creates this interesting, like, secondary market to the initial market. And I won't bore you with all the gory details. Maybe we'll talk about more during the live stream. But regardless, the point is that creates kind of an interesting thing where it kind of holds the line on pricing to a certain point, but also kind of holds supply. So I'll get into all that here in a minute. But let this run a little bit more towards the end.
Where do we go from here? How do we find the true prices? How do we help do enough people want to know the truth? What's the next? How do we further this beyond Jason Majura's LinkedIn post that people then have gone viral? How do we get further now?
Well, look, at the end of the day, the only way to fix things is for people to vote with their wallet. And I think a lot of people know what's going on. I think they understand what's going on, but they feel like they have no alternative. If they want to collect a certain thing, they're just kind of stuck. And right now, I don't see with where we're at that law enforcement is getting involved in issues like these. I don't see that the Department of Justice or
there is no regulation. Do you think there needs to be regulation? Do you think breaking?
Oh, regulation's been brought up. Hit the bingo on the bingo card. We got all the pieces covered. I think if somebody out there better have it on their bingo card, because we hit it. We've reached the regulation portion of our program.
Needs to be regulated as some sort of game that's beyond what was opening packs before. Is regulation the fastest and most effective way?
Boy, I hesitate to go all the way to regulation, but look, there are some things that are flat out illegal right now that are happening. For example, the repacks where they're essentially paying out like a slot machine, where they're guaranteeing a certain value and basically cashing you out, is 100% gambling. There's no doubt about it. It's 100% gambling. And right now, those entities are not registered as gambling entities to be.
So even though it's not a zero-sum game like gambling where you lose it all, if you get 80% of it back, you're just saying that doesn't follow the rules of what you can do.
Well, I believe the different games, for example, in Vegas, have different payout percentages, like slot machines and poker. They have percentage payouts as well.
Yes, guaranteed by the state's gaming control boards.
So I don't see it as any different.
You know what's the worst? When you record about 20 more minutes of this video, and then it turns out your audio was muted, and we didn't get any of it. So Eddie and Carlos back here, and hopefully we get this right, because otherwise everyone's fired. Even people who have nothing to do with it are fired. You know what? Jason from Upper Deck is fired. Everybody's fired if we don't get this done because we got a live stream to do. So I'm going to give you the short version of it because I remember most of what I was getting at. So anyway, I was talking about the different price points. I skipped the last little bit of the video because the last section of it was pertaining to Mr. Wonderful and the Wondershine Index and all that, just discussing it briefly. And it also gives you a reason to tune in and watch the video in its entirety. I did leave a link in the description that I'll mention. So let me get into the rest of it. My point here was talking about the whole price point thing and kind of presenting themselves in a certain light, which again, I have no issue with. He is the president of Upper Deck, so he should present it in a certain light. But I do want to talk about for a moment about EPAC. So I'll give you the really high level version of EPAC. It's the electronic pack opening system that Upper Deck has created that actually does kind of some fun things for them. What it really comes down to is this. You've got certain cards in it that are going to be digital only, which obviously not everybody's going to be as interested in. However, you can combine different ones. So if you open up some packs and you get a certain amount of these base cards, but you get 5 copies of certain base cards, you can actually combine them to create exclusive parallels that are EPAC only. These parallels all have physical copies that exist in the real world. They all get sent out to Cllct as a fulfillment center. So what happens is, if you do this and you say, I would like to have that card sent to me, Cllct is the one who provides it and can ship it to you. In the same vein, all the inserts and parallels that you pull out of these packs all exist in the real world. They've all been printed and they're sitting in a Cllct warehouse somewhere. The point is that when you create this platform on it, everything's listed in USD, so I'm going to use the wrestling example on it since I am very familiar with exactly the box prices and everything, but also show you one of the hangups with this and kind of plays against the whole idea of kind of holding prices in the marketplace, because EPAC is a situation where, because of circumstances and the way it's designed and the way Upper Deck has to do their business or has decided to do their business, they in some ways kind of hold the price up on certain products, even though the marketplace has moved on. And I'll kind of use an example here, just kind of convey this point, and then I'll also link it back to a hockey example, just so we can talk about it. So here's EPAC as an example. Looking at this category, I'm not going to waste too much of your time on this, but I want to really quickly summarize a couple of things. Obviously, there are the different packs. You can see bundles, you can see pack prices, case prices. It just depends. Some per box, some per case. Now, I'll use this example right here. 2024 Upper Deck Black Diamond. When this product initially came out, it was a very high-end product because Black Diamond tends to be on the higher end of things. It's got some very nice cards in it. It's one of those things where if you pull the right card in it, you could do very well with it. And there is some demand and some interest in it. However, this product's been out for a while, so it is kind of on the expensive side. And what happened is with anything else, after the initial buzz of the first couple of months, and after breakers open a bunch of it and all that, it's one of those things where, are there some good hits still left in the product? Sure. And it's one of those things where if you're a collector of specific people in it, then you can have a lot of fun with it still. The problem is, as you can see right there on the screen, it's still listed as $349.99. This is USD. I can tell you that even months ago, I went to card shows and I was able to tell dealers that was holding it, the dust was collecting on it. I said, I'll give you 250 Canadian. And they thought about it and they took the money. And that's how I got a couple of the boxes that I opened. And considering what I pulled in the boxes, I still kind of lost out on it. But the point was, I was able to open the boxes for a fraction of what this price point is. Now, to give Upper Deck their credit on this, part of the reason they've done it this way is that they don't want to undercut their own LCSs who are carrying the product. The problem is, on a lot of this stuff, after the initial buzz wears off, the market drops on it, and even after the breakers start having trouble filling breaks, the stuff just doesn't move. And the issue is, and the way that this is done, is that a certain amount of the product is held back. I said there are physical cards here, which means there are inserts, autographs, memorabilia cards, parallels. There's all kinds of stuff here. Some of it didn't make it into the physical boxes. They made it into EPAC, and they're literally sitting in a warehouse somewhere waiting to be redeemed. The problem is, the price point of this, you can still buy packs of it for $350 here, or a case for $1,720. The problem is, at this stage, who is the person who's going to do this? And eventually, on EPAC, some of this stuff does get discounted, but I'm going to show you what happens. So I'm going to scroll through here. There's different years, different products. And by the way, some of this stuff I've had some very good luck with. I've pulled nice cards out of AEW Skybox Metal Universe. But Carlos, you said a moment ago, the price point might not match up with the marketplace. Why would you open any packs of that? Answer is because I do know that some nice cards are available in there. I have pulled a gold PMG from 2022 AEW Skybox Metal Universe. So you can pull some really nice cards in there. I've pulled some very nice cards out of 22 AEW Allure. Even though I wouldn't pay $14 for individual packs if they were just sitting loose on a dealer's table, I don't mind opening a couple of packs of EPAC here and there when I'm a little bit bored and it's late and I just want to open a couple of packs. The thing is that I believe the way that it works out is that it's almost like if you're buying by the packs, it's like the packs are randomized over the entire universe of packs available. This is just a theory of mine. which would probably explain why I have had little runs where sometimes you get really, really lucky and you'll pull a bunch of nice cards. Where if I just open a box and I get what I'm supposed to get, I wouldn't get multiple autographs within a couple of packs, for example, or multiple lower number cards within a couple of packs. But in e-pack, it is possible. Where, like I said, I think the random number generation is actually giving you an entire universe worth of packs. So in reality, it's not like you're getting the one hit per box and you have to open X number of packs to get a hit. It's you could potentially get multiple hits in a row, or you could get nothing for multiple packs in a row. So it's one of those things where it's very much randomized in a much larger scale. The downside of that is once the price point on this stuff, once the buzz is worn off, once the breakers are kind of done with it, and the LCSs have got this stuff on clearance, or they're starting to price it down in order to try to move it out the door because they've got more product coming in, and it's a cash business, so you need to have cash to buy the new product. These e-pack prices are staying pretty static. So after a while, you go like, is it even worth it me to open the packs? Because some of the bigger hits at this point have either been pulled or they've just lost a lot of momentum. So even if you pull some of the nicer stuff, are you really doing okay in terms of price point? And sometimes the answer is no. Case in point, just to finish off this thought, is 2021 Upper Deck AEW. This was the very first, the inaugural series of this from e-pack that came out. Originally, it started way too high. I remember it being upwards of $300 a box, and it was crazy. And the product was just not built for that. That's where, using Jason Massero's example, that's where the market got out of whack with what the product was actually designed to be. The problem is, as a result of that, in order to not undercut the LCSs at the time, the e-pack price started off way too high. And as you can see from the little sticker there, this is 25% off, and it's still $200 a box US. There is no LCS out there that's going to be able to put even $200 Canadian or 150 Canadian on it and actually expect to move much of it. I've bought some of these boxes, truthfully, under $60. Some of them I've even bought at $50 a box after the fact because the people were just looking to clear it out. I've gone to small card shows and seen small stacks of these boxes, and I will offer because I'm interested in taking the chance. But the reality is that when you're opening these boxes, you're getting an autograph maybe one every 4, 5, 6 boxes at a time. So realistically, you could go through box after box after box, and you're going to get a couple of small inserts and things. But at this point, the interest level just isn't there. There was plenty of it printed, so you're sitting on it. But at the same time, with that said, speaking to the e-pack thing, I mentioned already that some of that stuff, a certain percentage of the print run is held back in the warehouse for the e-pack product. Well, how many one of ones? How many of the nicer autographs that are lower numbered? How many of those are still sitting there available for this, but they're available at either $13 a pack or $200 US per box for a product that I can go get a physical box for a fraction of that? And it's kind of tough. So who's going to be the person to bite the bullet here? How much lower does this price have to go? And considering it's from 2021, how many more years are we going to have to wait for the discounts to come in heavy enough to make it worthwhile to take the chance? Even if you knew you had like a 1 in 100 chance instead of the normal ratio, 1 in 100 chance of getting one of the one of ones or some of the really tough autographs, would you take a shot at $200 a box? Some people would. I'm not one of those people. But this is kind of the point, is that in reality, this is kind of separate almost. It's almost its own marketplace because a certain amount of the print run has been held back for this. And I think it varies depending on the product. But at the same time, the price point is out of whack with the market reality. So last example there, I won't show you this one because I don't need to. Similar vein, you've got a product like SP Authentic. I talked about a little bit earlier about how there's different price points on these things. And the Upper Deck president kind of alluded to, Upper Deck, in effect, kind of keeping it more consumer friendly, not necessarily going into the same vein or taking advantage of it the same way as other ones. But the reality is that a lot of products have escalated in price over time, and these different parts of it have changed. And I'll use SP Authentic because that's another very staple product on the hockey card side of things. So the most recent one that we've got here is 2425 Upper Deck SP Authentic. And I'm looking at one of the card shops that I usually frequent and purchase from locally. They've got it there at $259.99. So they've got boxes available right this minute that I'm recording this. I could buy these boxes. The configuration is 10 packs per box, 9 cards per pack. So you are getting 90 cards for $260. Now, I remember, this is years ago now, but at the same time, I remember boxes of SP Authentic at 150. And you were guaranteed to get an autograph that was a future watch. And oftentimes you would get a sign of the times. So you got the 2 autographs in there. I believe they still got the 2 autographs on here, but you also got more cards for it. So you got more cards. So what's happened is the boxes have shrunk while at the same time the price has gone up. So I guess my question would be, and this would be maybe a semantics question, but I guess When we talk about, shrinkflation, and you take a product where maybe you had 150 cards in the box before, but now it's 120 cards, or when it's 120 cards and now it's 90 cards, if the price only goes up $20 or $30, it doesn't necessarily feel like the price has gone up so much, but you're getting less in each box. So in reality, the price has gone up even more, but we've kind of hidden it behind the fact that we're putting less cards in it or less packs in it. So it's one of those things where there are different ways of raising the price without raising the price. Certain products can be some of those one box feast or famine kind of products where instead of Black Diamond, let me use Black Diamond as an example. Black Diamond today is a one box kind of one pack kind of thing. It's feast or famine and some of these stuff that's inside of it. But the thing is, I remember Black Diamond when you actually had the box and you actually could build a full set out of it because there was multiple packs in a box. Multiple packs in a box, and the purpose was you had the base set and you'd have multiple parallels of the base set, and then you had also some inserts. Now Black Diamond has changed configuration multiple times over the years, but the point is that it went from being a kind of a conventional product with kind of a tiered setup, and it tried different variations, different parallel structures and all that, numbered and unnumbered, all that stuff, and eventually it became a one box, one pack product. Well, even if the price point stays similar, it's a completely different thing. It goes from being kind of a mid lower end product to being a higher end product just by virtue of you're getting 5 or 6 cards in a pack and you're paying $200 or $300 or $400 or whatever it is now, and it's a completely different product. So the price doesn't have to go up a ton just to change its configuration. We can take Ultimate here, where you can pull some of those shield cards we were talking about. So Ultimate in the same store is $249.99. So $249.99 versus that SP Authentic that's $259.99. So does that mean that SP Authentic is a higher end product than Ultimate? No, the answer is no, because Ultimate has one pack per box, 4 cards per pack. So you're getting 4 cards for $250 versus getting 90 cards for $260. So do you see how it's not just the price point alone that determines whether something is high end or low end? It's really what you're getting in it for the money that kind of determines it. So it's kind of this weird little game where you can use an arbitrary price point, but there's a difference between $1,000 box where I'm getting 500 cards versus $1,000 box that I'm getting 6 cards. There's a massive difference, even though the $1,000 number is staying the same. $1,000 is obviously a lot of money, but I'm just saying there are different ways of interpreting that price point versus what you're getting out of these boxes. Okay, so there you go. You got that. I managed to cut maybe about 10 minutes off of this. So that is basically the point that I was trying to get at. Some interesting points from Jason Masher, president of Upper Deck. I'll leave in the description a link to the full discussion if you want to listen to it from front to back. I do recommend it if you're curious about him elaborating on some of the stuff that he talked about in his LinkedIn post. And with that said, we'll have more videos coming up on the channel. This one is going up probably a couple hours before the live stream, so you may not get a chance to check it out, or if you check it out after the fact, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on it. Otherwise, we'll talk about some of the stuff more in terms of the live stream itself, because we got a little time where we'll chat on that. And we'll also talk about a little bit of the expo prep, because we'll be right up against it. As well, on Monday, the podcast episode recording will actually be live, since I always like to have a live during the same week of expo, because again, next week is expo. We're officially under 6 days. So on the Friday live, we'll probably hear from Eric about the Shriners show. And next week, we'll all be convening up in the Toronto area. And if everything goes according to plan, I'm going to try to have a live stream on Friday. I usually try to have the traditional. I may do it on Thursday, I may do it on Saturday, but I will try to have it on Friday, probably from the hotel, if the hotel Wi-Fi holds up. So we'll see. Hopefully, if I get a chance to see some of you there, if you are going to be at the Fall Expo, then feel free to say hello if you see me somewhere. Otherwise, that's it for this one. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you next one.